Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I am Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
Hey, I think the temperature finally coming down here in Arizona.
It broke. We feel good.
I mean, shouldn't it be feeling good? This is mid-October, right?
Yeah.
And we're just now coming out of the triple digits.
But it's so nice that you kind of forget the misery. I opened all the windows in the house this morning to let all that fresh air in.
Yes.
And I already forget what 110 feels like.
I know. It went away as quickly as, well, I should say the cooler weather came just as quickly as we want it to come, I guess. Yeah. But like you said, I opened the windows too today. I was like, what the heck? It was like 72 early this morning.
Perfect drive into work. I had the windows kind of cracked a little bit to get that fresh air going. And just wakes me up a little bit more.
Sunroof?
I did. Yeah, I opened it.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
This is the time to do it. Hey, we're talking about college degrees and salaries today, and we're going to go way back in time with you, Susan.
Okay.
So you remember your days in college?
I do.
Yeah. What was your degree in?
You ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
I triple majored. I was a little bit of an overachiever.
Oh, man.
Broadcast journalism, political science, and Spanish.
Whoa.
I know.
So are you fluent in Spanish and I didn't know this?
No. I used to be able to speak it, and I took a bunch of classes in Spanish.
Yeah. Well, it was enough to...
But no, I have lost a lot of it.
Yeah. It's use it or lose it, as they say. I mean, you really, even if you know just a little bit, just... you have to keep going with it and or you just lose it totally.
Yeah, I had to do one class. The hardest class of my whole life was Spanish phonetics.
Oh.
And I can remember being in that class and being like, even if this was in English, I wouldn't be doing very well. This is too complicated. We're going back to Latin and above my head.
So you enter college and you have to take all the basics. Did you know exactly what you wanted to do? Like, I want to get a broadcasting degree. This is what I'm going to do. You did.
Absolutely.
Really? You're shaking your head. You knew exactly what...
Yeah.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. Before college.
Really?
Probably right when I started high school. I was like, this is all I want to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
I fell into my career.
Did you? I don't think I know the story.
Oh, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, as they say, very short. So I was going to school. I wanted to do something. Well, of course, I wanted to make a lot of money. I think all kids go to college thinking...
naturally you landed in broadcast journalism.
Everybody, I'm transitioning to that point. So everybody wants to make a lot of money. I'm going to get my degree, and I'm going to, do this and that. And I'm going to make a lot of money. And I went into accounting, thinking that an accountant makes a nice living.
Yeah.
Little did I know, though, when you major in business / accounting, you have to take all kinds of crazy stuff like trigonometry. You have to take statistics.
Not your favorites.
You have to take calculus. These are all things that might as well be Arabic to me because I
couldn't do it.
So the first year was a big...
Okay.
I mean, it was terrible. And by I think the second year around, my counselor finally said, "You know what? You're terrible at math.
Brutal.
I think we ought to transition you into broadcasting because you're really good." That's what happened.
I love it.
Her name was Janet Mason. She guided me to this career that I have been in for over 30 years and love every minute of it. But
way to go, Janet. She knew.
Right. I never in my wildest dreams wanted to do what I am doing, but because she said, "Hey, you're terrible at math. Get into English and writing," and then I wound up, broadcasting. Who would have thought?
It's amazing. I love that story.
And now I'm here. I'm working with you, Miss Spanish major over here. Well, broadcasting's the major one.
Yeah, that one's the third.
Yeah. It sounds good, though, triple major. Hey, we're going to be talking about degrees and Generation Z and what they're looking for and money and all that into one big role. And we're talking to Sarah Foster. She's an analyst with Bankrate. How you doing today, Sarah?
Doing well. Thank you for having me. I felt very seen by your conversation as well. I was a journalism major, which was not really the most lucrative here. So
yeah,
conversation ahead.
Well, it's perfect for what we're talking about because everybody wants to make, a ton of money right out of the gate. I got my degree and I've had it for 3 months and I want to make bukus of money. It's not like that. Even with journalism or any other degree for that matter. So let me kind of backtrack here, Sarah. So you went to school. Did you know what you were going to do?
I think I was one of those hopeless romantics, maybe, about my degree. I guess, it's like you were told all along that journalism is dying, newspapers, they won't exist years from now. I was trying to be like, with myself, where I was trying to be realistic. I tried to work hard, but I was also a little bit like, you know what, it'll work out. I think a lot of Gen Zers probably feel this way. We often see that they're the ones more likely to be thinking about their passions. They're not just paying attention to the money, although the money is a big, asking price for them. I think a lot of it might stem from what's really happened to the economy since the pandemic. Gen Zers were graduating in this red hot labor market and they had a lot of bargaining power. So maybe I'm a millennial, so maybe, they're a little bit more money focused just because they had the bargaining power to be than I was.
Yeah, you and Bankrate did a really interesting survey, and you just released results that basically indicate that a lot of students got into a major because they wanted to make a ton of money, and then they get their degree and they get out, and it's not nearly what they thought they were going to be making. I mean, did they not plan properly, or is that just something they're going to have to get used to, that, you got to work your way up from the bottom?
Yeah, this is something I try to remind a lot of Gen Zers that I speak with. And I think a lot of it also stems from kind of their sentiments about the way that they feel about the economy. They're told that the best way to kind of create wealth for themselves involves getting that college degree, graduating, making a lot of money, saving enough eventually so you can buy a house. A lot of that looks a little bit differently than it did 20, 30 years ago. So I think a lot of that is kind of stemming from just like the hopes that they have for graduating college with a high earning degree. But I often try to say here that we see in data that even though you might not start at that glorified six-figure salary, the path to getting that eventually might be there. And also just being in this early stage of your career, you're setting yourself up for more pay increases down the road. We see consistently in survey data that Gen Zers and even millennials are those groups who are most likely to get better paying jobs and to find pay increases to an even greater degree than those Gen Xers and baby boomers. So I think the story really is just kind of be a little bit patient. You're working your way up when you graduate.
What is the actual disconnect? I mean, what are people expecting to make and what are they actually making? And how does the industry kind of dictate how much of a divide there is?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So I look back at data that the New York Federal Reserve Bank has, and they've been polling workers on kind of that reservation wage. So reservation wage is really kind of a complicated way of saying, what is the lowest salary you would be willing to accept for a new job? And they have consistently found that really, over the past couple years, those new graduates are demanding even higher reservation wages than graduates were a couple decades ago at this point. So I think there is this disconnect between, what someone wants from their job and what they're going to get. And the way I describe the labor market is it's just like any other. It's like the stock market, the housing market. Everybody is trying to see who has the power here. Is it the worker or is it the employer? And in periods maybe like that post-pandemic red hot labor market that we saw back in 2022, many workers across the spectrum were getting the biggest wage gains that we had really ever seen in 20 years. Of course, now that's kind of balanced out a little bit. And so the latest data that we have is showing that a lot of these Americans, these Gen Zers, who pick some of the most lucrative salaries, lucrative majors, they're accepting a starting wage early in their career that's way lower, in some cases almost double, half as much as what they'd be earning at their peak. In some of the most valuable college majors too.
Yeah, we're going to jump into that in just a little bit, but you touched on something that I really kind of want to expand on, and that is a lot of these Gen Zers are going to these job interviews expecting, to make this much, way up here, and then even if they get a job offer, it's not nearly what they thought they were, hoping to get. I think that probably has a lot to do with the internets, and you have a lot more opportunity to research the career that you are trying to break into. For instance, 15 years ago, I don't think they had LinkedIn and, resources like that. But there's so many more resources out there. And plus, I understand that Gen Zers are actually kind of like sharing their information with each other And that's something that was kind of kept a secret years ago.
That is absolutely right. I think back to one of my favorite studies that I've ever done at Bankrate, and that was about 2 years ago at this point. And we asked Americans if they've ever shared their salary information with a coworker or professional contact. Baby boomers, Gen Xers were like, no way. Very few of them shared that information. Gen Zers and millennials, though, they were actually the ones talking about their salary, something that's typically taboo to even approach with people, especially with people that you work with. They were talking about it to an even greater degree. And I think this kind of, perception about what is taboo and, what actually is kind of a viable workplace topic has changed a lot, probably because of social media and just the way that so many young people today are just interacting with money related topics. I mean, depending on what your algorithm looks like, you might see any other influencer just talking about how they negotiated for a raise, talking about what their starting salary was. There's pluses and minuses, I think. The pro here is that you're never really going to know if you're underpaid unless you do your research. And with even more access to opportunity to learn what is a good starting salary, that will help you. But the con is, there's so many individual experiences that depend on where you live. If you're in a high cost area, you might not really be eligible for as high a paying job as that influencer who lives in San Francisco could be. And it's just something I think that's worth keeping in mind as a Gen Zer who is just trying to make sure that you can set yourself up for success along the way.
I think that's a great point that you just made, because if you have, say, an example, two friends who have the exact same degree as you do, and that person gets a job in Miami making X amount, and the other guy gets a job in Chicago and he's making X amount, and then you get the job offer with the same degree in Lubbock, Texas. It's not going to pan out. You're going to be making a lot less, and I think that goes to your point that you have to take that into consideration, because if you read something that says, "Oh, this career is making $100,000," but I mean, if you wind up in a smaller area or something like that, you're not going to make that triple digit salary. But I guess these Gen Zers, are they finding that out?
Yeah, I think that what they're kind of trying to do here is to just arm themselves with more information that they can take when they head into a negotiation. And I think maybe, a lot of Gen Zers that we talk to who are part of that cohort of people who are willing to talk about their salary with their coworkers, what they hope is that they'll be able to find at least a more realistic wage that kind of fights back against all that, flood of salary information that you often find on LinkedIn and Glassdoor that is very hyper specific to the location where so many workers are actually living and working. But that's, I think we often say that it's important to at least know what a good negotiation, or at least to have a good negotiation. It's a good idea to at least know what a good salary to ask for is. So information and research is important, but of course it's difficult to really kind of compare that apples to apples situation, as you said.
When somebody is getting ready to go into a negotiation, we don't want them to walk away from this podcast going, "Oh, I'm never going to make a whole bunch of money. I'm never going to get the salary I want." And it's not possible to negotiate right out of the gate for something worthwhile. We want to arm them with information. What's the best way to gather this information and go into a negotiation realistically, but also kind of striving for that top dollar?
Yeah, the best advice I often recommend is thinking about speaking your company's language. So you want to know how the work you're doing translates to its bottom line. You want to be able to put your work in the context of my, project it contributed X% growth in audience, revenue. I was able, even time saved can be a huge benefit to an employer. I think just speaking your company's language is a really good way to frame that negotiation, because a lot of times we see that the increases that workers get aren't necessarily because of cost of living concerns. So, translation, it probably isn't a very good plea to go to your employer and say, my egg prices have skyrocketed over the past 2 years. I would like a pay increase. Actually, we see that most workers who get an increase get it for compensation related, promotions. They get it for service and performance based rewards. So that's a really good way to kind of think about it, in addition to doing a lot of the research that we've already been talking about.
Let's transition to gross pay and net pay because your research revealed that a lot of Gen Zers are surprised that they're not making as much in their paycheck when they get their check. They were like, wow, I didn't know I had to put into Social Security. I didn't know I had to pay state taxes.
Who is this Uncle Sam guy?
Who is this Uncle Sam? And is he related to me and I didn't know it? Yeah, exactly. Your survey revealed pretty interesting stuff when it comes to that.
Yeah, so what we looked at was kind of trying to track, that starting salary versus the median wage for everybody within the industry. And kind of what we look at a lot is that it's really always those younger generations who have the lowest paying positions. And it's really just because they're still working their way up. But even the most lucrative majors that we saw, that were offering, six-figure salaries as a median. A lot of them were STEM careers, of course, but also pharmaceutical industries, computer science, engineering. Very few of them, none of them were actually offering a starting salary to those Gen Zers that was as high as the median wage for all workers. But the caveat here, and I think what is really important for viewers to take away, is that it's not that they didn't see that growth come eventually. So by the time a lot of them turned 27 to 33, some of them would see their salary almost double. And that's probably because they have been working their way up, and your responsibilities do change probably the longer you are at a company.
If you're an engineering major, and there's a lot of them, where there's electrical, computer, petroleum, aerospace, it goes on and on. And by the way, if you're engineering, you're a pretty smart, bright person to begin with. That's why I'm not in engineering.
If you couldn't do
I couldn't do statistics.
You're not going to do engineering.
I don't wear that hat. But the median salary for, say, electrical engineering, 115, computer engineering, the median salary is 112, petroleum engineering, 100,000. But the median salary for the kiddos in their 20s, it's like 60,000. That's half. 65,000 for computer, 65,000. So again, they have to realize that, yes, you may be starting off at a lower salary and you're not getting that 115 that you thought you were going to get. But if you do your job well, you are going to do well in that field. What fields are there out there where people are starting to really kind of like, make $10,000 more, $25,000 more? Are there any careers out there that you saw?
Well, actually, we saw that pretty much all of the most valuable, those quote unquote lucrative majors were offering something that was in that, five-figure range. Very few were also in that six-figure range for those starting workers. But, that computer engineering one is an interesting one because as soon as they turn 27 to 33, they're actually, already making what the median worker across age groups is making. So I think, that is really the key point, that you will, you might not see it at first when you start working, but eventually you will get that bigger salary.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's the point that we really wanted to make, that, you may not be making as much now as soon as you get out of school, but, hang in there. It will pay off. And, you're shaking your head over here going.
Yeah. I know. Well, I was going to ask, we're talking a lot about this six-figure mark. Is the six-figure mark still what it used to mean?
It's a really important question, especially with inflation, with housing affordability woes. I think a lot about, we did a survey earlier this year that found that almost, 2 in 5 Gen Zers and millennials combined felt like they had a harder time building wealth than their parents did at their age. So, $100,000 today, it's not really worth the same that it used to be. Back then that would have been a huge salary for someone in the, baby boomer, Gen Xer generation. And something that always comes to mind is we do an annual survey and we ask Americans how much they feel like they would need to earn to live comfortably. And it's always an eye-popping amount. $188,000 this year was on average what someone felt like they needed to make to live comfortably. So, we're talking about these engineering positions here that are offering these huge median salaries in the six-figure range, but they're not even enough as what many Americans feel like they want to make to live comfortably. So I think this will continue to be a big question of Americans, even in these higher paying jobs, feeling like they're priced out of the economy.
You indicated $180,000 is what they think they should make. And I think Bankrate did some calculations and found out that $180,000 now is or was worth $45,000 back in 1980. So $45,000 in 1980 is now $188,000 for. I mean, isn't that incredible? How the buying power? Yeah.
Yeah, it blows your mind a little bit.
It does blow your mind. Hey, Sarah, thanks so much for being on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to find out either more about you or Bankrate, I know you guys are always great with On Your Side. You're a wealth of information. Where can they find out more information?
Yeah, they can come to bankrate.com, and hopefully, we have data that helps you kind of get this pulse on how people are feeling in this current economy. But also we have resources out there for you if you're trying to choose a major, you're trying to hit a financial goal. So bankrate.com is really the place to go.
All right, sounds good. Sarah, once again, thank you for being with us on the On Your Side podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock. And every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.